A pistol dropped from 400 feet by helicopter, and it kept firing. A revolver still rolling off the line after 125 years. A frame frozen solid and buried in mud, fired 10,000 rounds without a single failure. These 7 handguns were built to outlast their owners, and some already have. Number 7. The CZ-75, born in 1975 inside a state-owned factory in Uherský Brod, Czechoslovakia. Engineer František Kutsky was called out of retirement and given something almost no gun designer gets: complete freedom. No committee, no military spec sheet, just permission to build the best pistol he could imagine. He took the strongest ideas from the Browning high power and refined them, running the slide inside the frame rails instead of outside, which lowered the bore axis and tamed muzzle flip. The result was an all-steel, forged pistol so well balanced that competition shooters still call it one of the most natural pointing handguns ever made. Jeff Cooper, the father of modern pistol craft, once called it the ultimate development of the Browning system, and competition results have backed him up ever since. 2 different IPSC world champions, American Doug Koenig and Frenchman Eric Groffel, have won world titles using pistols built on this same platform. Because Czechoslovakia sat behind the Iron Curtain, the CZ-75 could not legally be patented in the West, so gunmakers from Israel to Italy copied it openly for decades. That is not a knock against it. That is a designer's original blueprint proving so sound that half the industry decided to build on top of it instead of starting over. Nearly 50 years later, the CZ-75 is still in production in the same region of the Czech Republic, still winning championships, and still handed down from one generation of shooters to the next. A gun that outlives the government that built it has already answered the durability question. Number 6. The Ruger GP100, introduced in 1985 out of Ruger's New Hampshire factory, was built for one very specific job: a steady diet of full-power .357 Magnum rounds, fired for decades without complaint. It replaced Ruger's earlier Security 6 line, which handled Magnum ammunition fine at first, but wore out faster under a steady diet of full-power loads. Ruger's engineers studied that wear pattern and designed the fix directly into the metal, instead of relying on the shooter to baby the gun. They threw out the traditional side plate design, which is the weak point on most revolvers, and instead machined the GP100 from a single block of stainless steel, accessed through the top and bottom of the grip frame. Then they added a triple locking cylinder, engaging at the front, the rear, and the bottom, so the cylinder stays perfectly aligned shot after shot, even under Magnum pressure. Gun writers have described the frame as being built like the Red Hawk, Ruger's massive .44 Magnum hunting revolver, just wrapped around a medium frame. Owners who have put tens of thousands of rounds through a GP100 report the timing barely shifts and the forcing cone barely wears. It was never meant to be delicate or elegant. It was meant to be handed down from a father to a son to a grandson, still shooting to the same point of aim 3 generations later. Beyond police and civilian defense use, the GP100 has become a favorite for hunters who want a sidearm capable of taking deer-sized game in thick brush. Proof that the same platform built for duty holsters works just as well in the field. If durability had a shape, it would probably look like this revolver. Number 5. The SIG Sauer P226 almost became the standard American service pistol in 1984, and in some ways, it deserved to. During the Army's XM9 trials, the P226 recorded just 12 stoppages to the Beretta's 20, a clear reliability advantage. It lost the contract purely on price, not performance. Then, in the late 1980s, cracked slides on early Beretta M9 pistols started sending metal fragments toward shooters' faces during Navy training. The Navy SEALs had seen enough. They ran the P226 through a 5,000-round endurance test, and in 1989, they adopted it as their own sidearm, designated the Mark 25. SIG built the SEAL version with a chrome-lined barrel and chamber and a corrosion-resistant phosphate coating on every internal part, because a pistol that spends half its life in salt water cannot afford to rust shut. The design proved so dependable that the FBI adopted variants for its SWAT teams, the British military issued it to infantry heading into Afghanistan, and the US Secret Service carried it on protective details for years. That is not one agency's opinion, that is dozens of organizations independently arriving at the same conclusion. For more than 25 years, the P226 rode on the hips of operators through Panama, Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, right up until the Glock 19 started replacing it around 2015. More than 40 years after its debut, SIG still manufactures the P226 today, now offered in premium Legion editions for civilian shooters who want the same platform the SEALs trusted with their lives. A pistol trusted by the SEALs for a quarter century under some of the harshest conditions on Earth has nothing left to prove. Number 4, the Beretta 92. First built in Italy in 1975, became the American M9 in 1985 after grueling trials that tested the pistol across temperature extremes from 40 below zero to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, saltwater corrosion, repeated drops onto concrete, and burial in sand, mud, and snow. Beretta's engineers measured a mean of 35,000 rounds before failure, a number the Army considered equal to 5 or 6 full-service lifetimes for a single pistol. Part of what made the M9 so trusted was its aluminum alloy frame paired with a steel slide and barrel, a combination that shaved weight without sacrificing the parts that actually take the pounding. Soldiers appreciated the 15-round double-stack magazine too, more than double what the 1911 it replaced could carry. Early production M9s did suffer slide cracks in the mid-1980s, and Beretta fixed it fast, enlarging the hammer pin and reinforcing the slide at their own expense, a correction so thorough the Army never looked back. From that point on, the M9 carried American troops through the Gulf War, Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan for 32 straight years, longer than the M1911 it replaced had served before it. Armorers who maintain fleets of these pistols for police departments describe them the same way every time. It works until it breaks, and even then, it is almost always just a spring. Number 3, the Smith Wesson Model 10 has been in continuous production since 1899, longer than any other handgun on this list, and over 6 million have rolled off the line, making it the most produced handgun of the 20th century. Originally called the military and police revolver, it paired a simple, forged K-frame with the newly developed .38 Special cartridge, a combination so balanced that police departments across the world adopted it and never fully let go. Smith & Wesson even experimented with an all-aluminum airweight version in the 1950s, but when cylinder cracks showed up under hard use, the company simply switched back to steel and kept building. That willingness to correct course without abandoning the core design is exactly why the Model 10 outlived nearly every competitor built around it. During World War II, hundreds of thousands were parkerized and shipped overseas as the Victory model, riding in the holsters of pilots, sailors, and military police. What kept it in service for over a century was not flash, it was mechanical honesty. 6 moving parts that mattered, a swing-out cylinder that could be reloaded fast for its era, and a design so simple that a department armorer with a screwdriver and a spring kit could keep an entire fleet running for decades. Detectives, patrol officers, and the FBI all carried variations of this same revolver well into the era of semi-automatics, because a gun that has already survived 2 world wars and a century of daily carry has earned the right to keep going. Number 2, the Glock 17 exists because an Austrian engineer who had never designed a firearm in his life overheard 2 Army officers complaining about their outdated pistols. Gaston Glock, who until 1980 had built curtain rods and radiator parts, assembled a team of shooting instructors, police officers, and military experts, and in about 3 months produced his 17th patent, a polymer-framed pistol with only 34 parts. The Austrian Army's testing was brutal by design. Pistols were frozen solid, heated past the boiling point of water, dropped from 2 meters onto steel plates, and fired 10,000 times each. While every competing design from Beretta, SIG, and Heckler & Koch stumbled at some point, the Glock misfired exactly once. Part of the appeal for armies and police departments was maintenance. With only 34 parts and no external safety to fumble with under stress, a Glock could be field stripped and cleaned by someone with almost no training, which mattered enormously to agencies issuing thousands of pistols at once. By the mid-1980s, the Glock 17 had already surpassed NATO's own durability standards, and Norway and Sweden adopted it for their armed forces almost immediately. One documented Glock 17 later survived 18 years of continuous testing, more than 250,000 rounds fired, and 6 months fully submerged in the ocean, and it still functioned when they pulled it out. Miami police went even further in 1987, dropping a Glock from a helicopter at 400 feet just to see what would happen. It landed, broke its front sight, and kept working. Today, it is estimated that well over half of American law enforcement agencies carry some version of this same basic design, and every one of those torture tests explains why. Number 1, the Colt Model 1911. Designed by John Moses Browning and adopted by the United States Army on March 29, 1911, is the pistol every other gun on this list is quietly competing against. That conclusion traced back to earlier battles in the Philippines, where a military board led by Colonel John Thompson, the same officer who later invented the Thompson submachine gun, determined that American forces needed a .45 caliber round with real stopping power. Browning built his pistol around exactly that requirement, and the U.S. military never needed to ask that question again for over 70 years. His answer was a single-action, recoil-operated pistol built almost entirely from forged steel, and in 1910, the prototype passed the most punishing torture test the Army could devise, firing 6,000 rounds without a single malfunction serious enough to fail the trial. It went on to serve American forces through 2 world wars, Korea and Vietnam, a run of more than 70 years as the standard-issue sidearm, longer than almost any other service weapon in modern history. Even after the military finally replaced it, the 1911 never actually left. Nearly every major manufacturer in the world still builds a version of it today, more than a century after Browning first sketched the design. Even today, competitive shooters and concealed carriers who could choose any modern pistol on the market still specifically seek out the .45 caliber single stack because for many of them, nothing else feels quite as controllable in a fight. Soldiers, competition shooters, collectors, and first-time gun owners all still reach for the same basic architecture Browning perfected in 1911, because a design does not survive 14 decades of war, competition, and daily carry by accident. It survives because it simply refuses to quit. 7 handguns, 7 different countries, 7 completely different engineering philosophies, and one thing every single one of them has in common. None of them were built to impress anyone in a showroom. They were built to still be working when everyone who tested them is gone. That is the real definition of a lifetime handgun. Not the finish, not the price tag, just steel and design decisions that refuse to fail when it actually mattered. Every one of these guns carries real history, real engineering trade-offs, and real service records that go far beyond marketing copy. Understanding why a design lasts is understanding an entire century of global gun making. If one of these earned a permanent spot in your collection or your family's history, you already know which number it is. Which one of these 7 would you trust for the next 50 years? Drop your pick in the comments.